Well, good morning, everyone. Dr. David Phelps here this morning with another live stream challenge. We are talking this week about the soon-to-be launched book, What's Your Next? The Blueprint for Creating Your Freedom Lifestyle. This morning, really honored and privileged to have my guest, Summer Flynn, with us, and I'll give you Summer's background, but let me tell you first and foremost that Summer was my chief collaborator in this project. We spent, Summer, I'd have to go back and think, but we started somewhere around the fall of 2018, right? Was it 18 or, yeah. Or 19, maybe it's 2019. I lose track. Anyway, I was thinking about our work together, and the bottom line is we started the work on this book before COVID, before things happened this year. We got a lot of work done, and then COVID hit, and I think then the manuscript, it took some time to get through because supply chains closed down and a lot of things changed, so it took a little while, but here we are, and the summation of the book is done. And I thought it'd be so much fun for our listeners to have a chance to hear from us some of the work we did, kind of the things we distilled together, and how that went for us. And before we jump in, I will give Summer's background so you'll know that today's challenge, I want you, the audience, to be considering what's your story. That's your challenge. What's your story? Now we'll talk about that this morning, and it'll give you some insights as to how you can go back and figure out what your story is, because everybody has a story, whether you know it or not. All right. So my guest this morning, Summer Flynn. She is a writer, editor, and a coach who supports industry experts in transforming their ideas into impactful books that make a difference. After completing a Master's of Arts in English and a Master of Fine Arts in Writing, Summer's career began as a professor of literature and composition. Over time, Summer transitioned. I emphasize that word for a reason. She transitioned into collaborative writing and editing, though the core principles of her teaching background have remained with her and continue to help her clients hone their voices and bring their stories to the world. For more than a decade, Summer has built trust with business leaders and is the writer and editor behind dozens of best-selling books. This is going to be the next one, Summer. Right here. Next one of all those dozens. In addition to writing, Summer presents at professional conferences. She's a book reviewer for the Pulitzer Prize winning publications, has served as the artist in residence for performing arts companies, and acts as a creative consultant for several organizations. She lives in the mountains of North Carolina with her husband, young daughter, and a toy poodle who thinks he's human. Can't imagine. She continues to build, get this, she continues to build a business and life she loves. So keywords: transition, building a life that you love. That's kind of what we talked about in the book, right? The freedom assets and what's your next means, evolving. The words used in your bio, transitioning. If there ever was a time, Summer, in history, in our society, where I think people need to take a grasp that the world's changing at light speed. I mean, if the way anybody's doing business, life, career, whatever it is today, that's going to change like every year to some degree. So to some degree it's changing, and we have to be willing and open to not resist that change. It's so hard to take change. We all want to be in a routine. We want habits that are regular because change is hard. It's hard, but we have to embrace that change. So as we dug into this book a little bit, and we had fun going back and forth, and I'll just tell you, as you're thinking about your story this morning, a little tip is, it's a whole lot easier to discover your story if you do it with somebody else. It's true. Right? Summer, I mean, if you try to figure things out yourself, we're so deep in our own lives. I mean, we're immersed in it. It's like the forest for the trees, right? We're in the forest, and the trees are up here, and we can't see all the things. So when you work with someone else in a collaborative basis, it could be a best friend, somebody you know, like, and trust. In our case, Summer, this is your forte. What you do is work with people like me and other writers who have IP. They have their thoughts, ideas, and you help that. You extract it. Let's call that, you extract it, right? And then together you help kind of formulate it into a workable, readable, understandable manuscript that can be turned into a book or articles or whatever. Let's talk about the process, because you've done this, for years and years and years. What other pieces of discovering one's story could you add as far as tips that you've learned through the many years you've been doing this?
Well, I think the first one I would say, as you just pointed out, is collaboration. We all have our story, but we don't have objectivity about what is the most beautiful parts of our story, or, what parts of our story carry the most significance and the most meaning. So just like we talk a lot about hindsight, well, there are certain ways to force objectivity about your own story. One of them is with the passage of time. Well, that's why a lot of writers, they don't write their stories until later in life, because they do need that objectivity. Yeah. But there are a lot of times we want to share our stories and we're not later in life. We have things we want to say now. So one way to force that objectivity is to have a collaborative partner. And as you say, it doesn't have to be a professional, in the industry. Where a professional helps is that they can hear all about your story and help you find kind of that narrative arc that I can't even see necessarily in my own life. So right. I even remember as we worked together, David, you have such a compelling story, and you would tell just asides sometimes about things you remember or things that happen. And I remember one of the asides being the story that you told about being at the top of the stairs, hearing your father talk about, kind of the most recent investment. And it was, just, you kind of scooted right past it. And I remember thinking, there it is. There's a moment where something happened that if I had heard my own parent talk about that, might not have thought about it. But young David Phelps, it hooked something in you. So a lot of times we have pieces of our stories, but we don't necessarily know how to put them together and add the meaning to them. And that's where having a partner comes into play. Not only can they help pull that story out, but they can help you make sense of it, and give that objectivity that's so needed in order to share your own narrative.
Such a good point, Summer. Yes, I remember multiple times when you would ask me questions, and what you're good about doing is helping dig deeper. You would grab something that I was almost dismissing, just almost as you said, as an aside. And wait a minute, David, let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit deeper, because I think there might be something there. And see, I would have just run right by it.
Right.
So that's why you need that objectivity, that third person that can look from a different perspective and say, wait a minute, based on this is something that's very relatable. Our stories are relatable. I mean, that's how we do relate to people, is through stories. Talking about scientific data or principles are great, but you've got to be able to help people relate that to their own lives. And that's who we are. We're people. We share experiences through our stories, and it's hard, especially for so many people are humble. It's like, well, what do I have inside me? I don't have anything to share. That's what I thought for many years. I don't have anything here. What do I have to share? I'm just an ordinary person. And yet everybody has a story. And to your point, I don't think you need to wait until late in life. I think one of the benefits, Summer, of doing some of this work, whether you're going to write a book or an article, start somewhere, start small. You don't have to do a full book, right, to get this process started. But I think discovering who you are at any age in life, the sooner the better. But in doing that is, I think, through your life, through your story, and talking to someone else about it who will help pinpoint, there's a turning point, there's a defining moment, there's a great lesson. Now you are empowered to say, well, I do have something to share. I have something I could take out to my friends, or if I want to be a speaker. So many levels that you can go to take that from. But if you don't step out and discover who you are, then where do you go from there? Right. It kind of leaves you a little bit more stagnant. I think too, that as we talk about what's your next, we're in a society where there's a kind of a focus on what we do. We're doers, we're achievers. We're given status by educational achievement or work or career achievement. And so a lot of society is built on, well, what have you achieved? What have you done? What have you done? And as I look back in my life and the collaboration with you, Summer, I believe that it's more about who do we need to become? Who do we need to become to be more impactful, if that's our goal, to serve a wider audience, whatever we want to do. I think we have to become different people and not just do more.
Right. And let me say, David, that's one thing that I think is so profound about the book and your voice. And we talked about this when we were working together, is that you have a very particular mindset that can help other people. the issue with our own mindsets is that we take them for granted. So we could have this extraordinary outlook on life, but we don't know that it's an extraordinary way to view things. You know, the people who are optimists or anti-traditionalists or whatever it is, we just assume that everyone else looks at a situation in that same way. So I think that's why, you know, stories, we might feel like we don't have much to share, but if you think about it, the way that you view the world can be an extraordinary catalyst for someone else and how they view the world, and shifting that to kind of think more like that person. It makes me think, I used to do library outreach for a public library, community outreach for a public library. And I would go to homeless shelters, you know, juvenile jails, domestic abuse shelters, and I would take books. It was not a complicated program. I would show up with books. What I started to see was that when you put the right book into someone's hand at the right time, it can absolutely change their lives. And I saw it firsthand. And it wasn't that they necessarily, you know, took some deep course or really iterated a good bit with a successful person. It was just sitting and passively reading about someone else's worldview and someone else's mindset. And it's that epiphany, that moment of what am I doing? I can change my life. And I saw it with children in a juvenile jail who got, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or whatever book it was, in their hands at the right time. And they were never the same after that moment. Now, it doesn't always happen that way, obviously, but there is a power that happens when you read someone else's story at the right time in your own life. It can absolutely be transformative. And that's not only why I'm in this field, but it's why I get so excited. I love to talk to people. You and I, you know, on paper didn't have a lot in common. It was 5 minutes into our first conversation, you know, we had a very emotional connection about our children and things that we've gone through with our children and as parents. And that's what I think is the beauty of stories. I keep thinking of it a good bit lately because, you know, everyone's talking a lot about divisions but we all have a story. And sometimes I think if we could all just hear each other's stories, would we be as divided as we think we are? We're all humans. We all struggle. We're all on our own journey. You can always find someone else who's been right where you are on your journey, and you can use their decision-making and expertise to help find and carve out your own path. And I think that's what's so extraordinary about sharing the stories, collaborating with other people. You know, I feel so grateful that people will share their stories with me because it really does. Our collaboration is a perfect example of how I was changed after we talked about this book. And we can talk about that in a minute, but
sure.
It really, it was the right time for me to talk to you about your own journey. And again, even though seemingly we had very different educational and career paths, we didn't really. We in a lot of ways were had the same struggles, the same goals, and that's what I hope that readers get from the book, is that they can see themselves in it, whether they're a dentist or a doctor or in the creative arts. I mean, there's so much overlap, and I think it ended up being a very universal book for a very wide audience. So I know a lot of my friends will be getting it, especially my creative friends. Will be getting a copy of this book for sure.
I love what you said about the fact that there is today so much divisiveness, and that we all have core common struggles. And if we could find those and share those, that's one way to bring people together. Unfortunately, it seems like that coming together happens during crises or tragedy. You know, going back like 9/11, seems like the country came together for a while after 9/11 because there was this core common struggle that, but sharing stories is what brings people together. So I love how you look at the books and the differences they've made for people at the right time, right message, right time, because you can see through somebody else that the struggle you're having is not just unique to you. There's not something wrong with you, that this is common in mankind, but there's also a pathway out, and not just stay in that one place. Well, Summer, let's go ahead and talk about, as we were working on the book, together, what were some of the things that changed your thinking about, your life, your family, your goals? We identified together, what we call the 5 freedom assets: investing in yourself, investing in your business, investing in relationships, investing in capital, investing your hard-earned money, and then the kind of the Maslow's hierarchy, that the top there would be in your legacy, purpose, meaning, and all that. But pick anything out of there. What were some of the things, elements that struck you that were interesting, fun, and maybe changed your way of thinking to some degree?
Well, I would say before we started collaborating, I would have considered myself free. I own my own business. I don't have a boss. I choose who I work with. I work from home. I own my time. I felt, oh, I'm free. I've done it. After we talked, I realized that's not freedom. That's not real freedom. And the reason it wasn't real freedom is that I still wasn't necessarily moving up on that hierarchy of needs, as you say. So for me, it really, I took a little bit of time off after we worked together, and I restructured my own business. So again, going back to, we talk a lot about, being a dentist and stepping away from a practice. I could easily apply that to my own business, which is not even close to that field, a creative field. But I restructured my own business so that I was doing more consulting and coaching, and not necessarily sitting in a chair, trading my time for dollars, because that was never my intention. So I feel like there is almost this fallacy about what a free life looks like. And after working with you and seeing what your own mindset is, I realized I was still functioning under this very traditional, limited worldview that, you go to school, you get training in your field, you work and work and work, and you rarely question it, because when you look at your peers, they're doing the same thing. Right. When I looked at my peers, I thought, I'm better off because I'm working from home, or I'm choosing my clients, and really there wasn't a whole lot of difference. I still wasn't free in that bigger sense of the word. I wasn't thinking about legacy. I wasn't thinking about purpose. I was thinking about my family and these still noble endeavors, but it wasn't going to get me somewhere at the end of it. So I think the main thing that I took was this, what would David do, kind of a mindset here, and making it very intentional, so that rather than being a passive tumbleweed in the wind, I took an active approach and realized that every single decision I make for my own business is either contributing to that, freedom at the end, or it's taking away from it, even small decisions. So it really changed how I approach decision making. Take a beat, really think about, is this really getting me where I want to go? And I do think it's so hard because our entire culture is based on this just work and work and work, and you don't stop, and you're trapped. And that's where I think a lot of the division comes from, honestly, in our culture, is that some people feel trapped and some people don't. And there's so much resentment. And I think what you can take from this book is that you're not trapped if you made the decision to be there. So, what we talked a lot about is, I'm in my mid-40s. So I'm at the point in my life, all of my contemporaries are just working as hard as they can. We have responsibilities, we have families, mortgages, everybody's working so hard. So really what I realized is this is the moment where if I am intentionally investing in myself and my business, knowing that it's going to move me up to those higher tiers, then it doesn't feel like I'm trapped. I've chosen this. I've chosen, this is the phase of life that I invest in my business. So I'm still in control of that. It's not just happening to me. It's not, I don't sit down at my desk and think, oh, I have to do this again. I sit down at my desk empowered that I'm investing in my business today so that I can, invest in other areas of my life tomorrow. And I also took comfort in, your own story, and then the stories of a lot of your clients, is that it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It's, adopting a mindset,
Yes.
using that mindset to make every single decision in your life. And it is a slow process. It's an evolution. It might feel like glacial movements at times, but I can see even from I think our collaboration ended around January or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see in this year, even though it was one of the roughest years from a business perspective, I can see all of the decisions that I made that really propelled me, not necessarily with the money in the bank account, but in investing in my family, investing in myself. There are other ways that I was still able to invest in the life that I am building that weren't linked necessarily to income or what's in the bank account. So I think it gave me a very realistic perspective on building a business, building a life, building a legacy. And I think as long as you know where you're headed and there's a goal in front of you, then you can take those steps towards it, and you don't lose hope, because there's always momentum. Even in 2020, there's momentum, and that is so empowering.
Yeah. So, sometimes when we go through a crisis, and in this case, it was a global crisis with the pandemic, but that sometimes gives us a chance to really reset. Gave people time where we had to pause to some degree. Different people, different places had to pause, but to use that time effectively was a chance to really kind of re-diagram what our lives might look like on the other end. I know a lot of my clients had that time, and certainly at first it was scary. I can't go to work. I can't create the income and pay the overhead and keep my business afloat, and I've got staff and all this stuff. It was scary, but also instead of just being in chaos, these same people were intentional, as you said, intentional about saying, well, now what can I do? What can I control? And make the best out of this, and turning the corner. A lot of lessons were learned when people took the time to really focus on, as you said, the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. What is this life all about? What are my real goals here? What do I need to filter through in the decision making process to allow me to achieve the freedoms I want in my life? And now doing that, many people have changed the course of their thinking, as you said, and now are intentional about how they make decisions, even those small decisions, which have a compound effect, as we know, as much as the big decisions. Which ones are adding to, as you said, your freedom? Which ones are taking away from your freedom? And really looking that hard. And again, that's why I think the objectivity of another person is helpful. That's why one of the principles, freedom assets, is relationships, relationship capital. Who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with? It might be, you might have a close set of 2 or 3 really high level competence that you've spent a lot of time together with in life or business or personal, that you really relate to each other. But that those people will, as good friends, will be very, very, very objective in giving you good feedback, not just what you want to hear.
Right.
And then you may have other circles of friends or influencers. You might be in groups, or you could have a coach. Again, people that can just give you objectivity. So as you're making these decisions in your life, you're not just doing it in a vacuum where we normally work in life. Because let's face it, society and school have kind of set us up to be, individualists and figure it out for ourselves. The school is about that. You take your tests, you pass your degrees and licenses by yourself. There's no collaboration there. You've got to do it yourself. Now we get in life and go, well, is that the way I should still roll? And I say no. But I had to learn this myself. Summer, we talked about it. I was that way, and I didn't. In some respects, we sense sometimes that there's a weakness if we ask for help. No, you're a licensed this or that, or you've got this degree, and how could you need anything? How could you be weak in some areas? It's like, oh, look, we all have weaknesses. We to admit those and be willing to be vulnerable and ask for help from the right people. That's a big step up, and that was something I had to take some time to get over in my own life, to learn and be willing to understand that I can't do it all by myself.
Right. And we weren't designed to, right? We're a communal species. And language is the thing that has always connected us. So it does make sense sharing your story, even if it's not, in a book form. It's just talking to someone else. I think that it serves the same purpose. And I think to your point about 2020, I personally felt lucky that I had spoken with you before the pandemic, because I thought I saw, there was so much angst happening, during, especially in the early pandemic. And I felt like I saw a lot of people who suddenly they couldn't go to work, they couldn't step into the role that they've been stepping into for decades. You and I talked a lot about we're not what we do. That is not our identity. That is not who we are. And I don't think we live in a society that encourages that. So I felt like I was a little ahead of the game because I'd already stepped into this worldview of I'm not this, this is not all of me. It's just what I do. And I watched the extra angst of people who hadn't necessarily discovered that yet. And it was a trial by fire when they discovered they suddenly can't step into their role anymore. And I feel like a lot of people lost their identity a little bit. I think ultimately that was a positive thing, that people were stripped of what they do for a little bit and they were stuck at home with their families. And it was almost like a Freedom Founders social experiment of suddenly, we can't go and do the things we want to do. We're at home. We've got time. We've got our family. We've got ourselves. We've got our friends. So I think it was an interesting kind of experiment, 2020, if nothing else, and a good opportunity to apply a lot of what you talk about in the book.
Giving you the freedom to make some of these decisions, and as you said, transitioning to doing more coaching and consulting. What makes that fun for you? What does that add to your life and your experiences? How does that give you that the extra piece of what maybe was missing or you never explored before, Summer?
Right. Well, it certainly gives me more time. Gives me more time with my family at a good time for it. My daughter is home. We're homeschooling now. And I've been able to, I get to homeschool sometimes. It's not, I can't, I have to do this, I have to do that. And I remember when you and I were working together, at one point, my daughter, who's still quite young, said to me, I don't want to grow up because I don't want to have a job. I just want to play all day. And I thought, you can.
Right.
I wanted her to hang on to that worldview.
Yes.
I don't want to condition that out of her,
Right.
because adulthood should be playful and fun and all the things that we wanted it to be when we were young. So I feel like I've had more time. It's certainly built a lot of confidence in me as far as investing in my business and doing things differently. It's made something that had become rather rote, which I was proud of, because we live in a society where you specialize. Yeah. And suddenly when I diversified, I felt this sense of, the thing that I love, writing, I can still love. I can come at the same process from different ways that free up my time to do these other things. So I feel like I'm not there. Certainly, I'm not there yet. I'm not at any end point. But
we never are. Until our last day on Earth, Summer, we're never there. We're always evolving. Yes.
Right. And that piece of it, I think, has given me more this year than anything else that I've taken from the book, is the fact that when you are static, you don't necessarily know it, right, until you start to move a little. And then that evolution and that growth it's just so beautiful, and it just every day inspires the next day, because you're a little different. You've grown a little, you've adapted, and that I think has really been the greatest thing of all, is that I a year ago thought I knew exactly how the rest of my life looked. Today, I don't know how my life is going to look, and I love it. That's how I want it. And I'm building it that way.
Yes.
And that's what I think is, if there's anything that people take from the book, it's that you can intentionally build your life. It does take a while, depending on certain circumstances. But when you look at someone who has it all, they're not different from you. You can build that. You can work on that. You can evolve towards that. And it's that movement that I think is just so beautiful and transformative. It's just moving and changing and being, and just being human and enjoying the journey along the way.
Great words. Well, I'm so glad we got to come back around now. Like you said, it's been a year since we spent time collaborating, and just to rehash some of the key points that we worked on together, and you helped pull out of me and put it together in a form that I believe really does provide a strong message, and hopefully will impact a lot of people who have a chance to get a copy of the book. Summer Flynn, best way for people to connect with you?
SummerFlynn.com.
Easy enough. Easy enough. That's so good. Well, again, Summer, it's been such a pleasure and great pleasure to get connected again today. Thanks for sharing the work that we did together with our audience. Again, the collaboration was good here because we forget things, right? And you brought things back up that I'd forgotten about. So I love that about working with top shelf people like you that help people bring out their story. So listeners today, I hope as you've been listening to Summer and I talk about working on the book together, that you are thinking about your story and how wherever you are in life right now, you have a story, and how you could start to bring that story out, even if you're not ready to write a book right now, but just spend some time with other people who know you and start to determine, what is my story? What have I learned? Where do I want to go in life? Summer said, it's still wide open territory. Don't let society or industry or rules of behavior lock you into to a one-way path, because it's not that way. Summer, thank you so much.
Thanks, David.